Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by Snickers. Snickers satisfies them. Jamie, that's Dave, that's Heath. Let's get into the wide receivers that you're looking to add and maybe drop and maybe trade. It's going to be a fun week of waiver wiring when it comes to the wide receivers, because look at some of the names that we have on a bye. Oh, no Jamar Chase. What are fantasy managers going to do? Hopefully you'll find some key replacement options. Allen Robinson, what are you going to do? Probably drop him.
Didn't do enough in Monday night.
No, didn't do enough. Hasn't done enough all season, unfortunately. No Darnell Mooney, but he's somebody you might want to consider stashing or picking up. No Brandon Cooks, and no Giants as well. Let's talk about the guys to add here. And Brandon Aiyuk, for me, is the prize maybe of the free agent group of week number 10. Finally looking like the Brandon Aiyuk that we saw in 2020. He's got 15 targets his last 2 weeks. We heard the reports that he's out of the doghouse, and hopefully that will continue as Kyle Shanahan continues to lean on him. Michael Gallup's coming back after being out since week 1 with the calf injury. You see the 2 youngsters here, Rashad Bateman and Elijah Moore, both these guys playing well. Donovan Peoples-Jones, big opportunity for him without Odell Beckham. And then you see the rest of the list of the wide receivers you could be looking to add. For more, you can read it, the full waiver wire story, on CBSSports.com. So let's talk about Brandon Aiyuk a little bit more. So one of the bigger busts to start the season, but last week playing time was up, targets were up, catches were up, etc. This week, he's looking like Brandon Aiyuk once again. 8 targets, 6 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown, 18 PPR points. So, Heath, is he back?
I think that I feel pretty confident that he's somewhat back. He's a number 3 wide receiver for me this week, and we may get to a point where it's a bit of a question mark who's going to be better each week, he or Deebo Samuel. The first game, really, that we got with Kittle, Deebo, and Aiyuk all not in the doghouse or hurt. We saw 23% of the targets go to Deebo Samuel, 21% to Kittle, 21% to Aiyuk. If they can remain that concentrated, we can get 3 guys at 20% or better, we can start all 3.
I agree that he's the number 1 wide receiver to get off the waiver wire this week, and I love that he's been playing at least 70% of the snaps each of the last 4 games. He's been out of the doghouse for a while. We just now saw him have a good game statistically, and it is interesting that it happened in a game where George Kittle's back and Kittle had a monster game. But it all came with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. What happens when they move to Trey Lance at quarterback and the quality of target goes down, or the number of pass attempts that the 49ers have goes down? So Aiyuk, for now, fine. Number 3 receiver, I agree. But in a few weeks, we might be looking at him and going, what happened? There's just no upside there.
Very true. But also, we've seen this team be very successful with backup quarterbacks, and maybe Trey Lance is better than the C.J. Beathard's and Nick Mullins of the world, and he keeps these guys afloat. It's obviously an if, but we just don't know. You have to be buying into Kyle Shanahan and buying into what Brandon Aiyuk showed you last year when he was just an absolute star to close the season. Let's talk about the 2 young receivers, the 2 rookies, Rashad Bateman and Elijah Moore. So Moore coming off a 2-touchdown game. Bateman's been kind of the steady Eddie. Hasn't had a big blow-up game yet, but did get you 11 PPR points last week against Minnesota. Both these guys are going to get competition coming back. Bateman's going to get Sammy Watkins back at some point. Moore might get Corey Davis back this week. Quarterback, obviously, is a question mark for Elijah Moore with Mike White versus Zach Wilson. In terms of Bateman, Dave, what do you think about his outlook moving forward?
I think he could potentially be a good number 3 receiver moving forward, but I don't think he can make the top 24 leap yet. I think that's going to happen next year. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's playing at a high level, but he loves leaning on Mark Andrews, and we know that Marquise Brown has been having some excellent play week in and week out. Is there enough there to support 3 pass catchers week in and week out? I don't think it's there, so Bateman's just okay for me as a bench stash.
Heath, in terms of Elijah Moore, great the last 2 weeks, amazing against the Colts. But, again, Corey Davis did not play. Mike White and Josh Johnson did. Zach Wilson did not. Elijah Moore's status rest of season is what?
Well, I think he's such a tough one because you can't pick him up if you need a starter this week. I don't want to have anything to do with him or the Jets this week against the Bills. But after that, you've got the Dolphins, the Texans, the Eagles, the Saints, the Dolphins. It's a pretty good schedule, and I believe in Elijah Moore's talent. I think if everybody plays to the best of their ability, he's the best wide receiver they had. He just had this breakout, and they're a non-competitive team that is building towards next year. So I would expect him to see quite a few targets down the stretch. If I had to choose between Bateman and Moore, it would be solely dependent on whether I needed a starter this week. I'd rather start flex Bateman this week than Moore, but I'd rather have Moore in the fantasy playoffs than Bateman.
Totally agree, and we'll find out what Donovan Peoples-Jones has to say about these guys as well. Second-year wide receiver, no Odell Beckham on the Browns anymore. We've seen now Jones 12 or more PPR points in 3 straight games, coming off a strong game against the Browns, but the targets haven't been there for him. Only 6 targets max so far this season in any game. Had 3 targets, 2 catches, 86 yards, and the touchdown against the Browns. Against the Bengals. So, Heath, can Donovan Peoples-Jones be better than the 2 rookies?
I really have a hard time seeing it just because of this offense. They just don't throw the ball enough. And maybe if they only have one running back, we'll see them throw the ball a little bit more. But even when he's been good, like you said, it's been 4, 3, 5, 6 targets. I expect Jarvis Landry is going to lead the team in targets. The tight ends are going to get a third of the targets. And so I really don't. I think he's more of a keeper or a dynasty stash than somebody I'm going to feel confident starting this year.
All right, we'll see. Again, like you said, Baker Mayfield, 21 pass attempts, 14 completions against the Bengals. So we're going to need a little bit more for Donovan Peoples-Jones to trust him.